Yeah, hi guys. So we came to the conclusion that we probably need to do a short video essentially outlining the philosophies, the principles and the reasons why we train the way and what we do with our horses. I used the philosophy or the notion that the horse, I wanted to set things up so that the ideas that I have become the horse's ideas, and so the horse thinks that they're wonderful ideas. And the think of it would be, if the kids, you make them do the dishes. They might begrudgingly do the dishes, but they might be a little, they might miss the edges, they might not put some effort in. Whereas if the kids, you get them to where they want to help you and you say, hey, sure, you can do the dishes for me, and they willingly and want to do these things, the energy, the enthusiasm that they might have, they'll do a better job, yeah? And so it's the same for the horses, yeah? Make them do a lot of things, but that's how we get the horses to the places where they're shut down, or they do things in spite of us, or they do things, and it's not really with any connection or any purpose. The way of thinking of it that I really like is having a dance partner. At the beginning you go really slow and you just teach them the basic steps, but after time then you just add music and go faster and make it look pretty. And so for me that's kind of what I'm working for and what I'm looking for with my horses. I'm trying to build a dance partner. So how do I go about that? So there's the most important ones for me is you do as little as possible and as much as necessary. And what does that mean? It's kind of a, another way of looking at it might be 0 to 10. So, 0 being a thought, and you're going, as loud as you need to be effective, but back down to 0 straight away. And that ties back to the, being effective. You get something and then maybe say, hey, can I do this a little less? Can I do it a little quieter? Can I be a little smoother? And the reason why, that's quite relevant is the way the horse's mind and the psychology behind it works is that they're minimalists. Horses want to conserve their energy. So they're very observant animals, and so they'll look or learn in a manner that says, before something happens, they kind of work out the pattern behind it. And if you're consistent about showing something to a horse, they'll work that out and they'll start to respond off the lesser cue or lesser aid. The context of, say, a mare in a paddock, or a mare, with other horses, or even other horses in general, we might see them flick an ear or, wrinkle their nose or do something like that, and the horses will back off and kind of turn or run away, whatnot. Well, before that, they've kind of, a couple of times where that mare might have had to lift a back leg, or maybe she even kicked the horse, and he's kind of learnt the consequence and said, I don't like that consequence, so, I'll move off that slightest, that wrinkling of the nose, or the flicking of the eye or the ear or something like that. I really love this saying that came to me a couple of months back. It was, sometimes you've got to be effective to be understood, but sometimes you have to be understood to be effective. And how do you find out which one's the right appropriate one is, it goes back to that philosophy of, adjust to fit the situation that best fits the occasion, yeah. So if it feels right, then it probably is right. But like you've got to feel of these situations and kind of, don't be so rigid, don't be so dogmatic about what you're training for or looking for, but rather accept the try. And another thing that I really like there is, plant seeds, yeah. Martin Black spoke about, if you thought of it as, rather than harvesting all the time and taking all that try out of the horse, rather if you planted so many seeds that you had abundance, and then the horse just chock full of this try and this endeavour and this willingness, this want to do things for you, if you had that, then what you could get done with the horse would be pretty amazing. There's a common saying that I'll use, it's prepare to position before the transition. Well, that's a Ray Hunt, Tom Dorrance line there, but another way of thinking of that is prepare or ask a question before you ask the question. And it kind of ties to, the half halt at focus work, so getting the horse this position or place where you're riding along, and instead of the horse kind of looking out or kind of being reactive environmentally to any which way things are going on around you, rather the horse's eye and ear is kind of always checking in with you, like it's almost like it's flicking back on you and really listening to you. The importance of that is, you know, it's hard to be quiet, it's hard to be discreet when you know, the focus is everywhere else other than where you're at. And people kind of go, you know, oh, the horse maybe bolted me, or the horse, you know, shied for no reason or whatever. And typically, that's not the case. Typically, there was some telltale signs, or there was, you know, there was a signal or something going on beforehand that maybe you missed. Because when they're leaving you, or when they're doing those kind of things, it's because they're actually checked out and they're actually more focused or more aware of what's going on in the environment than maybe you were, and they felt the need to kick the self-preservation or the flight responses in, and that's typically what happens. In the context of riding, I sometimes demonstrate it like this. I say, you know, if you're riding along and say, for example, you're trotting along in the right rein, maybe you want to, you know, there's any number of things. It doesn't need to be a pull on the rein. It could be a weighting of your right seat bone. It might be a jiggling of your right stirrup. It might be a, you know, maybe you'd slap your thigh, or maybe you'd make a noise, draw their focus to the fact that you're asking them a question. So you're essentially asking them a question before you ask the question. So that if you want to get the accuracy that you maybe need, the correctness and the accuracy for your right lead departure into a lope, well, you need them kind of looking into the right rein and on that right arc, so that you're essentially saying, and now. And when you have that focus, it's almost like you could just get it just like that. Whereas if they're, you know, out here kind of going, and then you start to ask them a question and they kind of go, oh shit, and that's where the reactiveness and the worry comes from, is because they weren't really with you, and they weren't kind of on the same path. They weren't your dance partner. They were somewhere else. So, you know, it's kind of becoming more aware of those little things, and it's again being quiet, like, you know, being as refined, being as in time with them, having that partnership that you're ultimately working for or striving for. Work on the philosophy that, you know, like you hear it all the time, make the right thing easy and the, you know, wrong thing hard. Well, if you thought of it, I like what John pointed out to me in the past. He said, you know, Tom would say it a little differently. He'd say, you know, if you make the right thing easy, everything else should be hard. And it's kind of that, you don't need to set things up and make them an argument or make a big deal of all these things sometimes. Sometimes you just need to, you know, set things up and let them find it. Let them come to their own conclusions. So sometimes that goes back to, you know, the notion of agendas and plans. And you know, agendas are where you are dogmatic and fixated on doing something, versus a plan where you'd kind of adjust to fit the situation, and you kind of, you know, maybe the timing wasn't right there just then, so maybe you don't need to do that in that moment. So there's sometimes some things to kind of, you know, how you live your life and how you work with the horses. There's a lot of parallels and a lot of, you know, a lot of consistency there, where sometimes we, you know, sometimes we don't really kind of take the time it takes. We kind of get so we need this right now, and it's like, why do you need that right now? What about it is so essential? And I get it. Sometimes it's a safety thing, or sometimes it's a, you know, that's a line of sound for me, is if there's a safety issue, then sure, you're gonna, you know, do whatever you need to do to be effective. But a lot of time you could try and do less. When you're working with young green horses, you need to be mindful or understand that it's the timing of the releases. It's what are you released to? And also this, the more contrast you can put into your communication, so the more black and white you can make things, the more ask a question, release, the clearer it comes to the horse. And so they get to understand when they're being asked something of them, and when they're being free or released from whatever they've just done. And those kind of things are really important to bringing on a young green horse, or even, you know, working with a mature or older horse. You know, those kind of things are just as important. But, you know, the horse looks for balance, symmetry. You know, it's really hard to have all of those things I've spoken about when you don't have relaxation, when you don't have that mental connection to you and what you're working on. So sometimes it's kind of step away from the arena or the trail or whatever, and kind of go back to a place where the horse can listen to you and be with you and think about what you're working on, and get it to this partnership where the horse wants to do things with and for you, rubbing the fur off them and all those kind of things. So I hope this helps, and I really hope that some positive discussion and questions come out of this, and yeah, I really look forward to sharing with you the coming week or so the 5-day challenge that we've got coming up, and yeah, enjoy the time with your ponies. Thanks a lot.